So yeah, I'll preface this by saying in 2013, I was very pro Edward Snowden. I thought that what he did of like revealing the extent of illegal NSA surveillance on the American public, I thought that was a good thing, and I thought that was a public good. And I was in that time I was very pro whistleblower. I thought like if a government is doing something illegal and something that's detrimental to its citizens, and there's no legal recourse to expose that, I think it's a good thing if like that gets revealed. And I followed his case very closely. And at the time, I was very much like in the camp of, so why don't more people care about this? Why don't more people care about surveillance of people, of citizens from the government, especially when it breaks laws? But and unfortunately, though, as time went on, I kind of felt that like Edward Snowden, and as well as people like Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning, they became too in love with their own legend. They basically made everything about them, whether they intended to or not. I think the story shifted to just them as individuals and them, their own lives as like in the center of these cases, rather than what they exposed. But even with that, though, as I've done more research and as I've thought about it over time, I think there's a bit of irresponsibility of like doing these like mass leaks because we know that, for example, like with WikiLeaks with Julian Assange, a lot of those like so-called redacted documents they weren't fully redacted. They were kind of like sort of like this part is censored and this part is censored, but this part it could reveal disastrous information that could actually compromise national security. And the thing with Edward Snowden, though, specifically is though, so as everybody knows, we're in Russia and Ukraine like are in the middle of a war, and Edward Snowden is living in Putin's Russia because that was the only country that could accept him. And I understand that was the only country that he could end up going to. The problem is though is that first he said that like Russia wouldn't invade Ukraine, that we have nothing to worry about, and then of course contrary to that, Russia did invade Ukraine and they're still waging a war against Ukraine. They've brought forth like a terrible death toll. They're destroying Ukrainian culture. It's a terrible war, and you really don't need to get into that though. We know that already. But with Edward Snowden specifically, I understand that he can't probably criticize Putin. He can't, come out and say that, this is bad, this is terrible. I understand that. What I don't appreciate is that as he's living under this terrible autocrat, this terrible dictator, he thinks that his place is to criticize American domestic policy, especially at a time when Putin is criticizing the West. Putin's regime is like really, dialing up the anti-America, the anti-Western rhetoric. So if you just look at this from like an optics perspective, is it really a good thing where if like Edward Snowden, somebody who used to be in American government, he fled to Russia, and now when he goes, he takes a break off of social media, and then when he comes back, he spends his time criticizing America. I just don't think that's really helpful, in this situation. And I think in a worst case scenario, that's a propaganda victory for the Russians.
Well, I think you can make an argument, more of an argument for Julian Assange. I mean, you see some of the like footage of him and just how his body's deteriorated over time, and how when he's
Sure.
in like in jail or I guess in prison or whatever you want to call it, that he's under. It's terrible situations. And so with Julian Assange, I'm definitely more, I don't know what the right term is, but like sympathetic, I suppose. I'm more understanding of the people who support him and want him free. Again, I'm probably more in that camp of I think Julian Assange should be free, and I think he should basically just go home and be able to live his life however he sees fit. With Edward Snowden, it's a little bit more of a complicated issue, I think, because, like you said, he is in Russia right now because they were the only country that would allow him in. And again, I think, like you were saying, some the things that he had shown were important to kind of let people know, not just in America, but around the world, because I think he also talked about other countries, what they were doing, at least the governments were doing. And I think the public does have a right to know, like, your government is doing some really shady, weird, crappy things, and the public should have a right to know about that. Now, like you were saying, I think I don't know how long the span was, maybe for like 3 or 4 months or something like that. He didn't say anything about when Russia invaded. Well, I think he did say something along the lines of like, "I was wrong, I got it
Right.
wrong," or something like that. And he wasn't the only one. A lot of people got it wrong. A lot of people are saying it's not going to happen. And the reason why they're thinking that is because Russia was saying this over and over again. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. This is our red line. We're going to do this. And then when they hear it again, that they're possibly Ukraine saying they're going to invade. Well, they've been crying wolf for years. So of course we kind of have to go back to well, it's not going to happen. But then when it does happen, everyone's kind of like, oh, now what we do? Whoa, now we got to think of
Yeah.
something else to say or whatever.
And I understand that too, but it's just that, like, okay, if he's not gonna, I can understand like if he's in a position where he can't comment about Ukraine and he can't criticize Russia, but why just talk at all then? I think, especially now, we know that he has a kid now, and his, I don't know if they married, but like his partner moved with him to Russia now. In his position, if I were him, I would focus on his own family and focus on his own personal life rather than like wading into like these political issues, and especially criticizing America and criticizing the West when we're in like a war where propaganda is everything and where optics is everything. I know it sounds like it might sound trivial to some people, but I mean, that helps Putin, that helps the regime. And if it was like a nobody, for example, if it was just like a normal person, maybe it wouldn't matter so much. But Edward Snowden, he's a former member of the US government. And no matter how many times he wants to say that, like, he's not pro Putin, he's not like, helping them. That really doesn't matter in the end, though, because the government itself, the Russian government, they can use him as a propaganda tool to help their cause.
Yeah, that is interesting about the optics, and it does look that way for sure. I think, yeah, maybe Edward just feels that he's kind of in that tight spot where it's like someone else living in another country, like someone living in France and going, man, Australia is doing some,
Yeah.
and it's just all the time they're just talking about Australia's like, well, what
Yeah.
about France? You know?
And I get into it too because, like, so I'm an American and I moved to Japan, and occasionally I'll talk about America, but I never really tell America like how it should run its laws. I mean, like, this is a principle of mine. As an American citizen abroad, I can vote in American elections, but I choose not to vote in elections because I don't think it's my place as like a person who's not part of American society anymore to choose how American society, what direction it should go in.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely easier to criticize the American government as an American than criticizing the Russian government as a Russian. I mean, I don't know, maybe someone can correct me on that, but from my understanding, that's what I would think it would be like. So again, maybe that's just how Edward feels. Is that, well, if I criticize, I don't want to put my family in danger. But yeah, like maybe just don't say anything at all then.
I'm just like trying to like wrap my mind. What is his mentality at the moment? Like, who does it help for him to like speak about like American issues? I know that like the abortion thing is a very big thing now, like in U.S. Domestic circles of like domestic policy. But
Mm.
like, who does Edward Snowden help by like speaking out against any of this? He can't even do anything himself. He's like an American who lives like in a country where there is no free speech, and whatever criticisms he has of American society, I just think that like it's very easy for like the Russian government to like turn that around and say, yeah, you see, here's somebody, he like lived in your country and now he was betrayed by his government. He just wanted to like help his citizens. He just wanted to help his people, but now he's on our side now.
Well, also he's had movies made about him. He had one
Yes.
documentary win an Oscar,
Yeah, I saw that.
and yeah, so yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's all gone to his head. I don't know. I'm not Edward Stone. I don't know what he's thinking, so I have no idea.
Yeah, and it's just that like I have like an issue. So like I've seen that documentary. I've also seen the Oliver Stone adaptation of like Snowden. It's to me like it's entertaining, yes, but I mean, like, do these movies like the documentary I can understand because it's just about like history about what happened, but like, does Edward Snowden really need like a dramatized movie? Like, is he really somebody who's like worthy of like a fictional like narrative film? Because like he said like at the beginning, this isn't about me, this is about what I've exposed. Well, I mean, yeah, there's a Hollywood movie based about you, dude. I don't know how it can like not be about you at this point.
Well, I think in this day and age, I think having a movie made about Chelsea Manning would seem more in avenue of what Hollywood does nowadays. You know?
Sure, but it's just though it's like what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought there for a second. For a second, but yeah. But anyways, so, like the point is though, it's like these like whistleblowers and everything. It should be about like what they expose, and it should be about like what they're doing. But I think it's very easy for like bad actors on like both sides to like use it for their advantage. So, as I'm sure you remember, there was a time where like WikiLeaks was like the darling of the left because it kind of exposed the bad stuff that like America was doing, for its foreign policy, bad or like shady, kind of suspicious. But the problem with that though is like that's ammo for people like Noam Chomsky who will always criticize American foreign policy, who will always blame America for everything wrong with the world. And so I think that like the problem with like with people like that is it's very easy for like that anti-American, that anti-Western crowd to like basically use that to their advantage. But then on the opposite side of that, as you remember, in 2016, WikiLeaks had like the whole hack of the DNC about the corruption of the Democratic Party. Now all of a sudden, WikiLeaks is the darling of the right, and the left hates WikiLeaks. So I mean, as like an outsider looking in, I think it shows the hypocrisy of both sides, but it also shows you like more practically how like both sides can use that to their advantage. And it kind of like raises the question like do people actually like care, or are they just using this to score political points against the opposition?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that's just how politics is if my side's gaining traction, I'm all for it. If the other side's gaining traction, I'm gonna do everything I can to fight it, and I want them to lose and all that. It's just how it is, especially in American politics. I mean,
Mhm.
I know, like you're saying before, and how you've said a lot about how the Japanese people don't really talk about politics. It's not like something they go, "Oh man, did you see what so and so did in the
Mhm.
diet today?" It's not like a topic
Yeah.
of conversation hardly.
Honestly, I found it funny because during the 2020 election, like they were looking at like the map of like there were Japanese networks covering the American election, and it said they're more enthusiastic about the American election than they are about their own election because you had like all these like panelists like just saying like who could win what state. It's almost like a sports game. What team is going to win what game. What direction is it going to go in? But I think maybe that's just it speaks to the point that maybe American politics is more entertaining in a lot of ways, and I think there's been an unfortunate blend of politics and entertainment.